Hey kids, it's Mrs. Birth again. So since we had already completed 6.2 lesson 1 and talked about kites, right now we're going to do lesson 2, which deals with isosceles trapezoids. So as we did in our first lesson, we are going to first come up with the rules in regards to isosceles trapezoids, angle measures, and their side lengths. So hopefully, again, you have this printed out or have it in front of you for you to look at while I'm going through this, and something to write with, whether it's in your notebook or on this piece of paper, so that you could follow along as I go through this with you. So when we're looking at the rules for the trapezoids, there's a couple things we need to look at. We need to see that in this picture here, we have this symbol here and here. And I don't know if any of you remember this, but we have talked about this before. And that means that the bases, this is a base, this is a top base, and this is the bottom base of an isosceles trapezoid. They are parallel. So the first rule we are going to write here is that the bases of the trapezoid, the top and the bottom of them, are parallel. The other thing I want you to see, be able to notice when you're looking at this picture, is that the opposite sides are congruent. They have the same measures. So we're going to put that down as our second rule. That is, the opposite sides are congruent. And I'm going to, and again, I'm use the symbols for congruent. Now, if we look at this next picture, we're going to look at some of the angles here. We notice that we have, remember I said that this is a base and this too is a base, not the sides. So this top base and this bottom base, what do we notice about these angle measures? Well, the angle measures on the bases are congruent. Well, guess what? That's also a rule that we need to remember and write down. The angles on the bases are congruent. Again, what does that mean? That means this entire angle and this entire angle are going to be congruent. This entire angle and this entire angle at the base of the trapezoids are going to be congruent. We also see a diagonal here. And what do we notice about the diagonals? That they are not congruent. So unlike the kites where it cuts the vertex into two equal parts, or whether it cuts the shorter diagonal into two equal parts, this does not have that same rule. So the diagonals are not congruent. So that's going to be our fourth rule. And that is the diagonals are not congruent. Okay? So using the rules that we had just done up at the top, we are going to fill in all of the missing values. Well, let's do that. Remember, one of the things that we said, we have 21 degrees here. What do we notice about where that 21 degrees is? It's where this 41 is. We know that if this is 21, this too has to be 21, because we know that the bases, whether they are at the top or at the bottom of the trapezoids, are going to be congruent. We are also given this 57 degrees here. If this is 57 degrees, this too is going to be 57 degrees. So now we have some information that we are given, but we don't have all the information that we need. So if we notice, These diagonals also make triangles on the inside. So what I'm going to do is, because we have two pieces here, I'm going to highlight this triangle first. And again, we're going to follow those rules that we did with the kite to find the missing angle of the triangles. And that's going to help fill in the pieces of the rest of the trapezoid. And honestly, referring back to some of our old vocabulary, that too is going to help us find some additional parts. So let's look at this triangle again. So we have 21 and 21. So again, how do we find the missing angle measure here? Well, we have to add 21 plus 21. We know that is 42. And all the angle measures have to equal 180. So we're going to subtract 180 from 42, and we get 138. So that means this angle here on this trapezoid is 138 degrees. Now, how is that going to help us? Well, what do we notice here? We have an X, right? What do X's make? You guessed it, vertical angles. So if this is 138 degrees, this also has to be 138 degrees, which means that this angle here, this 21, is going to be here, and this 21 is going to be here. Because again, if you did 138 divided by, subtract it from 180 and then divide it by 2, again, you're going to get 21 and 21. So what does that mean for this triangle over here? I'm going to do this one in yellow. Well, first of all, we don't have any 90-degree angles, so we can't subtract anything from 90. But we do know that we have a straight line here. We have a linear pair. So one of the things we could do is we could subtract 180 from 38 to get this angle. So let's do that. We're going to do 180 minus 138, and voila, we get an answer of 42. So now that we have this angle and this angle, we could do exactly what we've been doing before, add them up and subtract 180. So underneath here, I'm just going to go plus 57, and I get 99, and I'm going to subtract 180 from 99. I'm going to subtract 99 from 180, and I'm going to get 81 degrees. Okay? So now we have fulfilled all the angles within this triangle. Well, what does that mean here? Well, again, remember we said we made that X? So if these are vertical angles, these two are also vertical angles. So if this is 42 degrees, what do we know about vertical angles? That they are equal. So that too is 42 degrees. So we have two of these angle measures that are similar to these. We know that if we add them and subtract from 180, we're going to get 81 again. So then that one is 81. So as you see, as long as you do one of the triangles, you could easily figure out the other ones. The trickier part, and what's different also from the kites, is that there are no 90-degree angles here or at the corners. So you are going to have to make sure you're doing your math correctly and that you use your linear pairs and your vertical angles appropriately. So for this one, we know that we have parallel sides, and they're already given to us, so we don't have to do anything with them. But we do know that the opposite sides of the trapezoid are congruent. So if this is 11, this side too has to be 11. Now, the other thing that we had noticed here was that we were given this angle measure of 49 degrees. Well, what do we know about the bases of the trapezoids? That they must be congruent. So if this is 49 degrees, this, oh my Lord, this also has to be 49 degrees. But how do we find these angle measures? Well, they are supplementary. So all we need to do is subtract 180 from 49, and we get 131. And we also know that this is one of the other bases of the trapezoid, so if that's 131 degrees, this one also must be 131 degrees, okay? So there's the first page of our notes. If at any time, folks, that you need to stop and just review what I just said or stop and write down what you need to write down, then please do so. You don't have to go as fast as I am. I'm just trying to avoid any other interruptions like from my dogs like you did in lesson 1. Okay, so the second page of the notes. At the top, it says the trapezoid mid-segment connects the midpoints of the congruent sides of a trapezoid, okay? So we have, again, the trapezoid mid-segment connects the midpoints of the congruent sides of a trapezoid. Its length is equal to half the sum of the bases. So what we're going to do is we are going to use this formula here to figure that out. But let's look at what this statement is saying. Here is the trapezoid mid-segment. It breaks this side and this side into 2 equal parts, and it also bisects this side into 2 equal parts. Now it also says that we have the bases of our trapezoid. So how are we going to find the measure of the mid-segment? Well, in order to find the measure of the mid-segment, we have to add these 2 bases together and then divide by 2. Because remember, mid-segment is in the middle. So if we did that, you're going to get, as it says here, 54 plus 33, divide that by 2, and that is 43.5. Okay? So let's look at a couple examples here. The first thing I want to do is, because we just talked about the trapezoid mid-segment and the formula for it, I kind of want to do that first. So we have 32 and we have 18. We need to find this trapezoid mid-segment right here. How are we going to do that? The first thing we're going to do is we are going to add 32 plus 18, and we're going to divide that by 2. 32 plus 18 is 50. Divide that by 2, we get 25. Okay? Now, the next thing is, we know that we have these 2, this side and this side are going to be the same because opposite sides of the trapezoid are congruent. And we have these tick marks, which also mean is that if this is 9, this is congruent, so that is 9, this part is 9, and this part is 9. Okay, good so far. So now we have this base, which is 63 degrees. So if this is 63 degrees, we know that this too also has to be 63 degrees. Because again, what do our rules tell us? It tells us that the bases are congruent to one another. But we have to find this base here. Well, how are we going to do that? What did I say they were? I said that they were supplementary. So what we need to do is we need to take 180 and subtract it from 63. And what do we get? We get 117. So this is 117, and this is 117. And there you have all of the missing values in that trapezoid. Now for this one, we have this whole piece here. It says this whole side equals 24. But as you could see, this mid-segment cuts it into 2 equal parts, which means that if this is 24, this is then going to be 12, this is going to be 12, this is going to be 12, and this is going to be 12. We also know that if this is 101 degrees, this base is also going to be 101 degrees. We also know that if we subtract to get the other base angles, if we subtract from 180, we are going to get 79. So that means this is 79 and this is 79. Now, how are we going to find this piece right here? Well, you could do one of two things. One of the things that I have done is because I go from smaller to larger, I'm going to subtract these two numbers. So I'm going to go 53, minus 41. And when I do that, I get 12. But that cannot be my answer to this the longer base or the larger base of the trapezoid. It has to be larger, right? So that is just a difference between these two. So if these two have a difference of 12, these two are also going to have a difference of 12. So I'm going to add 12 to 53. So I'm going to go 53 plus 12, and I get 65, which means that this base is then 65. Okay? And that is from when you go from smaller to larger. You're going to subtract to get the difference and then add to get the larger base. So now let's look at this one. Well, we now have some algebra to worry about here. How are we going to do this one? Well, we have to plug this into the formula that we have up here. So we have to add the bases together and then divide by 2, and that's going to give us the mid-segment. So we have to set it up that way. We add the bases together. We're going to divide by 2. If I could stop breaking the points of my pencils. And we're going to have it equal to the mid-segment, which is 3x minus 7. Well, how are we going to get rid of the division? By multiplication. So if we multiply by 2 over 1 here, the 2's cancel out. If we multiply by 2 over 1 here, now we have to multiply. So we are left with 6 plus 22 equals 2 times 3x minus 7. Okay, remember, how do we get rid of the parentheses? We have to distribute. But we can add these two together, which will give you 28 equals 2 times 3 is 6x. 2 times negative 7 is, oh my goodness, is negative 14. I'm going to add 14 to both sides, and I get 42 equals 6x. I'm going to divide by 6. I get x equals 7. Now, guys, remember, we only found x. We have to plug it in to the mid-segment here to find out what that value is. So 3 times 7 minus 7, we know that 3 times 7 is 21. 21 minus 7 is 14. So this is equal to 14. Okay? All right. So now we are left with the last trapezoid, and we have to find all of the angle measures here. So again, let's look at what we are given. We are given part of the base angles here, so we know that they are congruent, right? So if this is 14, this too is 14. We also know about vertical angles. So if this is 74, this too is also going to be 74. We also know that we have made a linear pair here. So we're going to take 180 minus 74, and that is going to give us 106. So if this is 106, again, we have vertical angles. This too is 106. So now we have given some of the parts of this triangle. for us to be able to finish the rest of it. Excuse me. So let's do that. We are going to first look at this triangle here. All right, we're gonna look at that triangle. We're given 106, I'll even make that darker. We're given 106 and 14. We know that 106 plus 14 is equal to 120. And if we subtract that from 180 minus 120, we're going to get 60, which means this is 60, which would then mean this part of this base angle is 60. And we have two of the triangles within the trapezoid already done. Well, that leads us to the next question here. What's going to happen with this triangle and this triangle? Well, when we looked at this over here, right? We have this and this are equal to one another. So that kind of goes with the isosceles rule that if you were to subtract from 180 and then divide by 2, you're going to get these two angle measures. So we have to do the same thing here. So we're going to do 180 minus 74. And again, we're going to get 106, which we already knew that from before. But now we have to find the two angles. So now we need to divide by 2. And when we do, we get 53. So this angle is 53. This angle is 53. And that would mean these other two angles here are also 53. Mainly because they share that. Okay? And that's really all she wrote. It's really putting together some past vocabulary that we have learned and identifying some of these angle measures, making triangles to identify what those angle measures are, because you know you're going to be subtracting from 180 or they have to all equal up to 180. Remembering that linear pairs have to equal 180. So when you're finding the insides of them, you're subtracting from 180 to find the other one, okay? All right, so down below of your notes sheet, you will see that there is a worksheet that you were responsible for, and also another IXL, which I'm sure you're all so thrilled about, Geometry N10, and you must receive a score of an 80. Again, please be on the lookout for any announcements that you will see in regards to any Zoom meetings for any of you who need any assistance. And if you can't Zoom and you need to text us, please do that. Otherwise, just let us know if you need anything, guys, okay? Thank you, and we'll talk to you soon, guys. Take care.